Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our third lesson on Shabbat. Hope to conclude today. If not, next week we're going to talk about Hanukkah, and then we'll finish with Shabbat, or we'll start our new topic. We got to the point, last time we sort of like went through what does a typical Shabbat look in an observant home. And we got, we did the synagogue, we did the preparations for Shabbat, we talked about the services, and now today we're going to talk about the Shabbat dinner. What do we, how does a Shabbat dinner table look? Usually you put a white tablecloth. You don't have to. It could be orange if it's, Thanksgiving and Shabbat, or other colors of whatever you want. But that's sort of like the traditional white, angelic. Yes, questions?
At my grandmother's house, this is going back to the 30s and 40s, when something was happening to anyone in the family where you had to pitch in, the pink tablecloth came out. Otherwise, it was white.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
I just
That's a nice
learned
memory.
recently, and I thought,
That is beautiful memory. So you then, really bring out your nice dishes week after week. I have the memories of the dishes in my home, which we still use, a little bit chipped here and there. And, and the ancient silverware that you have to, clean all the time. And then you have, does it go to the dishwasher or not? You sort of like have all these arguments. And then you also make sure to set the table with a few elements that make it a Shabbat table. First of all, it's the Kiddush cup and the Kiddush cup holder, which is like a saucer where you put the Kiddush cup on. You don't have to, but it usually comes as a set. Then you put the two chalot, the two breads on it, where you say the blessing on them, and you also cover them. And the reason you cover them is?
So the challah shouldn't be jealous that the wine is going first.
Yes, can you believe that? The challah went to the psychologist and sat on the therapist, table, and came to the conclusion: why am I always second? Why do they? Oh, hi, Larry. Welcome to our lesson. And
my wife is trailing me behind.
Okay. So. When she comes in, I'll maybe stop and also recognize. So we're talking about the Shabbat table and why we put the challah cover over. And you're right. Okay, the challah really decided that she's always, second and after the wine. And why is that? She wants to be first as well. What does it mean that she wants to be first? Hello, Naomi, and welcome to you and to Larry and our whole and our whole. Yeah. Our whole study group would like to, send our condolences to you. Our heart is with you, and we're hugging you, and are very happy that you're here and studying here with us.
Can't get enough hugs.
Yeah, we will. Everyone give a hug after the lesson to Naomi and Larry. If not, everyone is updated upon the passing away of their beloved son Daniel Savel, and the funeral was last week, and we had the shiva. So yeah, I'm sorry. Did you want to ask something?
2 challah?
Yes, you're supposed to put 2 chalot in the evening. There's a debate if you need to put 2 chalot also in the morning. A lot of people do that, But the reason you put 2 chalot in the evening is because the second one is to be used on the second day, and it sort of like commemorates the manna in the desert that God gave the people of Israel the manna on Friday, and then he told them on Shabbat, don't go out. When you go out on Friday, get enough for Shabbat as well. We studied that at our first lesson. I talked about that in length, and that passage appears in the book of Exodus. And to commemorate that, we have 2 chalot on Friday. And then the debate is with some people that say that you should also have 2 chalot to commemorate the same thing on Shabbat morning. And some authorities say, no, you only need that 1 challah from the evening, because that's really the way to preserve the minhag, the custom. So why would the challah have these inferiority complex that she is second? And is she correct for saying that she could be? We could go before the blessing on the wine. We could do the blessing on the bread. And actually, she has a point. The Talmud has an argument that says, how do you bless the Shabbat at the Shabbat table? Okay, do you do it on the bread or do you do it on the wine? We know that we do it on the wine, right? We say Kiddush. Kiddush is to sanctify the day, okay? And we say, Boe pri agafen, and then we go right into the whole Kiddush, and we say Mekadesh Shabbat. You could do exactly the same thing, friends, with a challah. Okay, you could say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and then do the Kiddush part, which ends with Baruch Atan Mekadesh Shabbat. You could do it on the bread. Okay, and there are different opinions in the Talmud, and the rabbis at the end decided to go with the Kiddush first, so not to insult the challah, we cover it. She doesn't hear the Kiddush, she doesn't know what's going on, and when we uncover the challah, she's like, oh, I'm here, and and then she feels like we're doing Kiddush on her as well when we say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Okay, so that's the explanation of why you cover the challah. Yes.
So how is it that the challah is a she and not a he?
Oh, that's a very good question, because lechem, okay, in Hebrew is a he.
Uh-huh.
But challah is a she because it's associated, I think, with the Shabbat. And the Shabbat is also a she, which is interesting because Sunday, which is Rishon, is a he. Monday, all the days of the week, okay, are a he. And Shabbat is a she. And that's because we sort of like relate to Shabbat as the queen. Shabbat, the queen. It's like, the most important day of the week.
The Shekhinah,
The Shekhinah, yeah, which is, the Shekhinah is like the feminine part of the divine, of God.
Because I had heard that it's the bride, the Kala,
Yeah.
and you cover the bride.
No, that's a different thing. That's a Kala.
Yeah.
A Kala is a bride. A Kala, and that's with a Chaf.
Right.
Okay? The Chala is the
You gotta watch your fast.
okay.
I know.
Okay. This is the Kala, the bride, and exactly the same thing. Okay? So these same letters are the same, but this is the different one. Okay? So they are not connected at all. Okay?
Question.
Yes. Although some people say boi chala, which is like at the end of L'chadodi, we say boi chala, which is come bride. But if you're very hungry and you haven't eaten, so some people say boi chala, let's eat already. Okay? Yes.
Is this primarily Ashkenazi tradition, or is it
To cover the chalot?
all of the Shabbat dinner the way we do it, which is the way I've never been to a Sephardic Shabbat, so would it be
So the
different?
Kiddush is different. The Sephardi Kiddush is somewhat different, but the order of things is the same. Okay, they and we'll get to that, but they don't say, for example, Shalom Aleichem. In some traditions, they don't do that. In some, they do. Eshet Chayil, some do, some don't. But the essence of doing a kiddush, washing your hands on a motzi, is done in all traditions. Yes.
For the kiddush over the wine, does it have to be grape wine?
Does it have to be grape wine or? Yes, it needs to be grape wine unless you don't have it. Okay, if you don't have it, it could be. I mean, it needs to be something that you're able to say Borei Pri Agafen, and Gafen is the grape. Okay, which, by the way, in the Sephardi traditions, you say Borei Pri Hagefen. Okay, so there are different ways of pronouncing it as well, which is this. It's the same word, but it's just the pronunciation is different. But if you don't have that kind of wine from the grapes, so you're able to use something else, like beer, something else that's alcoholic.
I'm just wondering why it had to be grape, because you could have wine from all sorts of fruits.
But I don't think you'd say a blessing of Borei Pri Agafen on them. You would say Shakol Niya B'Dvaro. No, you would say Shakol Niya B'Dvaro, and that's less preferable. It's only like the default is wine, and only if you don't have the wine, the grape wine.
But where does that come from?
Oh, that comes basically from the Talmud that says that the best way to sanctify God is sort of like over the grape wine, which was also what was custom back then. That was like the best quality. Okay, they did wine from other things, from dates, from things like that, or beer. That was considered inferior. Okay, so you sort of like need to use the best. And for people who sometimes drink not kosher wine, that was not, let's say it wasn't done in a monastery by monks, which makes it problematic to drink. But let's say it was done in a big factory in an automated machines, and there's some authorities, especially in the conservative movement, that say that it's permissible to drink wine that doesn't have a kosher stamp. Okay, so for kiddush, you try to make sure you have a kosher wine, and some even try to get a wine from Israel, okay, which is like so like the best of the best, as they say.
By the way, it has to be a fermented grape, though. You mentioned alcohol.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to have alcohol in it, okay, but it needs to be fermented. Yeah, it needs to go through that process. So they have, the Manischewitz wine, like for the kids, which is
Kedem grape juice.
Kedem grape juice, right. They can't just be any grape juice. It needs to go through the process of like winemaking. They don't do the whole fermenting process. I think they make it shorter. I don't know what the technique is there. Okay. So this is all on the Shabbat table, and then there are interesting traditions in Sephardi. There's like they don't put the knives on the table during the time of the kiddush, or until the dinner begins. And sort of like, because knife is considered like a weapon. So it's like a nice tradition that you only bring the knives after the dinner starts. So sort of like to have like a peaceful, Shabbat is like the world of peace, the world to come. So it sort of like symbolizes that. There are traditions where for the grace over the meal, after the meal, so they take again the knives away. So they're very different traditions. But the foods are also, some homes, the foods are very, very strict. They start with a first course. It's always gefilte fish. It's always soup afterwards, chicken soup. Some families go very, very crazy about that. And I've seen that, including, if you remember that the last time we studied about the garlic, that people, so some people really eat garlic on their table, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yes.
then, the next thing is you sit at the Shabbat table. There's always, people that have the same place where they sit Shabbat after Shabbat. I remember I could tell you exactly where I sat for 18 years, at the Shabbat table, and if my sister would come today and try to sit in that seat, I would be very upset and tell her, this is my seat, okay? And that's like sort of like how families operate on Shabbat. But if you could please turn that off, it's okay. And then the singing begins, the ceremonial parts before the eating. First, it's the song of Shalom Aleichem, which describes the angels of peace that are walking with the person on Shabbat, sort of like guarding and protecting him. And it comes from a very interesting story in the Talmud that talks about these two angels that are walking back with the man from the synagogue. Okay, and the Talmud tells that there's one bad angel and one good angel. And what are they? They're walking with this man and they're saying, and the bad angel is like, you'll see, we'll get to this man's home and the Shabbat table is not going to be ready. Everyone's going to be fighting in the house, and he's going to come in and he's going to be upset, and they're going to fight, and Shabbat is going to be a terrible Shabbat there. And he tells the good angel, and if I'm right, you'll see, you're going to have to say Amen. I wish this will be every Shabbat. And the good angel says, no, you'll see, he has a Shabbat table. His wife is showered. The kids are showered. They're all waiting for him when he's coming back. And if I'm right, you'll have to say Amen. May it be every Shabbat like this. And they come to the man's home, and of course, the good angel was right, and the bad angel has to say Amen. May it be this like this every Shabbat. And this is sort of like the basis for the concept that the angels of Shabbat are walking with you wherever you are on Shabbat. Shabbat is a very special time of blessing, and that's why we move to the next thing, which is Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor, or as we say in Israel, a Wonder Woman. Okay, actually, the way the movie Wonder Woman was translated in Israel is Eshet Chayil, woman of valor, and it comes from the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, and traditionally the husband sings to the woman all these verses. They go according to the alphabet. And it talks about, the woman that goes out. She's also a merchant. She also prepares the food. She also sews. She's good to her children. She's good to her husband. And this is like a woman of valor. And this is sang at the Shabbat table by the whole family, because really, at least traditionally, the women were the ones that, would prepare the Shabbat and work very hard on that, okay? If everyone could just make sure your phones are off, they keep going in different pace.
Rabbi?
So, yeah.
A little story about the angels. Does that relate at all to the tendencies to avoid sin, and the two in the Talmud or in Pirkei Avot? One wanting to do good, the urge to do good, or the
probably. I think it's connected to that. Yeah, I don't know exactly, but it sounds like that's where it comes from. The next thing is the blessing of the children, which again, because this is a special time of blessing and the angels, so this is like a special blessing that has started only in like the 16th, 17th century, where the parents, it's usually the father, puts their hands on the children and he blesses the children that they will be like Ephraim and Menashe, that they will multiple and prosper, and blesses the girls that they will be like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Okay, and then he says the priestly blessing to the children, And there's a big debate, actually, could someone who's not a priest say that blessing? And it has been determined that at a special time of blessing, the father is like a priest, so that they could say that blessing as well. So it's a practice anyone could do. And it's a beautiful tradition to bless the children at that point. Then we do the kiddush. Yeah.
Can your mother do it too?
Yeah, a mother could do it as well. I remember I was in Ukraine many years ago at this synagogue, at this conservative synagogue there. They were doing like this whole event and a Shabbat dinner, and they had waitresses that were helping out. And one of them came to me and introduced herself, a young girl, and I said, "Hello, where are you from?" And she said, "From here." And I said, "Are you Jewish?" She said, "No, but my father is Jewish." I said, "Okay, that's interesting. So you are from a Jewish origin?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you go to any?" She said, "I don't know anything. I don't remember anything. I just remember one thing that my father would used to say to us every week on a Friday." I'm like, "What is that?" So she starts saying something I couldn't understand. She says things like, I'm like, "What?" I was like, she said it again. I'm like, "Can you try to say it a little bit slower?" He said, "I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just mimicking what my father said." So I put my ear, I said, "Oh my God, this is the priestly blessing." He said every week to them in Ukraine, in communist Ukraine, he would say that blessing to them. That's what he knew to say, and that passed on to her. So I explained it to her what it was, and it was like really beautiful. Okay, so then comes the Kiddush, and the biggest debate in world Jewish history is, do you stand or do you sit for Kiddush? What do you think? Do you stand or do you sit? What do you do? Stand, right? Anyone here sits for Kiddush? Our family sits for Kiddush. And okay, and actually, it makes more sense to sit at the Kiddush, okay, because you're supposed to do Kiddush at the Shabbat table, and it's supposed to be part of your meal. If you're standing, you're sort of like not attached to the table. And the other party says, "Excuse me, you are testifying. You're testifying that God created the world, and you're testifying that the holiness of Shabbat. So when you're testifying, you have to stand." Okay, and then comes the Hagra, I believe, one of the greatest rabbis in Poland, in Vilna. And he rules that you stand for the first part and then you sit for the last part. So when you're drinking from the wine, you're drinking at the table. So I have seen people stand and do the entire Kiddush standing and drinking at the end. I've seen people who sit through the entire Kiddush, and I've seen people who stand, sit, and drink, and all these things come in, but this is like a big debate still going on.
Is there a minhag for doing the Kiddush at the synagogue that's different?
Oh, that's a very interesting. Thank you for reminding me. I didn't want to talk about it. Kiddush in the synagogue is a practice done only outside of Israel. In Israel, they do not do Kiddush in the synagogue. And the reason for that is that the rabbis say that outside of Israel, there are smaller communities. I'm talking about the time of the Talmud. Maybe not everyone is versed and knows how to do Kiddush at home. And also they might be afraid to do it at their homes because, the Romans are chasing them, or the Greeks or something like that. And therefore, they always did Kiddush at home in the synagogue to make sure everyone is sort of like covered. In Israel, they do not do Kiddush at home because the assumption is that most people would do it at home. So they don't do it in the synagogue.
So do they have the same discussion about Kiddush at the Seder table? About sitting and standing?
Yeah, and again, I think on Passover you have to drink the wine.
Leaning.
Leaning to the left. Okay, we'll get there when we talk about Passover, not now. Okay, so that's a proof that you have to sit.
Oh,
Okay,
okay,
because
got
you
it.
do not lean standing and drinking. That could create, even more stains on your Passover before the Seder even begins, right? You don't want that. So that's the proof that you're supposed to sit in a place of eating.
I like that question.
Okay.
What?
I like your question.
Yeah, no, that was a very good question. So the Kiddush is basically constituted of two parts. The first part is the testimony that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day, and that's why we need to do that. Then it's the blessing on the wine, and then it's sanctifying the Shabbat. So there are two blessings in that section. There are different melodies to doing that. There's the beautiful American melody that I grew up in Israel, which I think you all know. Kivanu b'chalta. Okay, and the problem is when you go to a Sephardi family, not only they don't sing it in that tune, they sing it in a different tune. They don't have that part, Kivanu b'chalta, that you chose us from all nations. They don't have that part in the Sephardi Kiddush. Okay, it's a different. So it's interesting to see different versions of not just the Kiddush, of different prayers. When we get to prayer, we'll talk about the phenomena of different versions in prayer, unlike the Bible, for example, which is all the same version, and there are no changes. But here, every community in a different diaspora had a different prayers that they said, but they are very similar in many other ways. After the Kiddush, you go and wash your hands. People think the main reason is to have clean hands, but it really is to sort of prepare them for eating the bread in clean hands. Not clean in the sense that we think about it, out of germs. Okay, they did not know about germs in the times of the Talmud, but the reason is to purify them. Okay, so you're eating the bread in a purified way. So the Talmud doesn't care if you use soap or not to wash your hands. Okay, you need to take a special vessel. This is not a good example, okay, because the vessel, you don't touch the actual vessel. They have the handles. You seen like the kid, the ones for washing your hands, they have a handle. Why? So you don't touch the actual cup. You touch the handle, and then it helps the purification process. And there are different traditions. You do one hand, the other hand, the other hand, and the other hand. You do 3 times. There are different traditions. You don't have to do it that way. And then you say a blessing on Asher Kichanu Tzatav Tivanu Al Netilat Yadayim, which is saying to God, you have commanded us to wash our hands and to prepare them, to purify them for the eating of the bread. Then comes a very difficult part for Jewish families. And what is that? Before Hamotzi, what are you supposed to do or say?
Where's the bacon?
Okay. No, after you wash your hands, nothing.
We're supposed to say nothing.
Okay. After you wash your hands and before you eat the bread, you are supposed to be silent. You're supposed to be quiet. And that's very hard, especially if it's a big family of, 12 people and you have guests, and everyone's washing their hands. Until they do that, everyone's quiet. So you see, families, they do sign language. Okay, and you don't know exactly what they're saying. Or the father needs the salt, so he's like, and he wants the salt to be passed over to him. Why don't you speak? Okay, because the blessing over washing the hands leads you straight into eating the bread. Okay, so you're not supposed to stop and talk between one mitzvah and the other mitzvah. The mitzvah of washing the hands leads you into eating the bread and the blessing over the bread, because they're all the same, they're all one. Okay, so you have to do it like as one unit, which means you need to be quiet and not say anything. Okay, and there's a debate even. Some people say if you did talk or too much time has passed by, you need to strike out. You go back, you wash your hands. So you don't want to do that as well.
Does that relate also to Pesach, where first it's silent and then
No, that's a different thing. We'll talk about when we get to Passover, about that. So you wash your hands, you wipe them very well, because the water cannot touch the bread, or else your hands are not are purified in that sense. And then you say hamotzi, which is blessed are you, God, okay, who takes bread out of the earth, which is a very interesting blessing. Okay, by the way, we don't say hamotzi challah from the earth. Okay, we call the challah lechem. Okay, so the bread. So the challah, which is it's a special kind of bread, but we name it. We say the same blessing that we say during the week over bread. We say the same blessing also on Friday, which is also interesting. And then it's just interesting that what does it mean? Like, did God take the bread out of the earth and brought it to us? Okay, man did that. Okay, so it's sort of like glorifying God and man together. God gave us the ability, gave us the mind, how to go through the whole food chain. Okay, and prepare from putting seeds in the ground, watering, and then plowing, and then making it into the white powder flour. Thank you. And grinding it and making it into flour, and then adding the water and in the yeast, and the whole process, a very long process. I think someone counted there's 32 actions like in between, from the time it grows until the time you eat the bread, and that's all done by a man in partnership with God. Okay, so we glorify that partnership, and we eat something that man has prepared with a partnership with God. So it sort of like symbolizes our abilities as human beings. And the blessing is said, and then comes a very big debate of what happens now. Once you say a blessing, you have to eat from the bread. Okay, some people cut the bread with a knife. Okay, they put salt all over the pieces, and they give it out, and then they eat a piece. Some people actually take a piece, they eat it. Now they can talk, by the way, which is great. Everyone else can't talk until they eat. Okay, I love doing that and torture people at my Friday night dinner. And then you cut for everyone else, and you give it to them as well. There is a tradition, which was the custom at our home always, where you break by your hand all the pieces, okay, and you don't cut it all. Okay, and you do that barbaric act of pulling the bread and throwing it out to people. Okay, you seen that? That sounds natural, but think about an observant from outer space seeing that. That's like pretty barbaric. Not only you pull the bread, you throw it at people. Like, what's going on here? Okay, and the reason is to imitate the manna falling from the sky. Okay, and it's sort of like, so it's like, because that's the bread, right? That's the manna of the day. Was there a question, Cindy? Or that's just
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. Why, two questions. Why, I don't know if I'm jumping on this too early, but why the salt? Because my parents always had like a really pretty salt shaker just for Shabbat. So I thought, okay, this must be important. And then why 2 loaves of challah?
Oh, so 2 loaves of challah, we said at the beginning, is like the manna that was on Friday. The people of Israel in the book of Exodus were told by God, go out and collect the manna, not just for Friday, but also for Shabbat, because they're not allowed to collect. So it sort of like symbolizes those 2 loaves of manna are like the 2 loaves of bread. Okay, so that's symbolizing that. And the salt is has been used in ancient cultures to preserve the meat, and especially, so all the sacrifices in the temple were giving with a bit of salt as well, to sort of like symbolize the eternal bond between God and the people of Israel. Okay, so we also add the salt to that bread, which is also sort of like considered our sacrifice on that day that we eat. Okay. So the bread is handed out. Either you cut it in a nice way. There are different customs in the Sephardi customs. You take the 2 loaves, you hold them together, and you say, "Potech et yadecha u'maspia lechol chai ratzon," which is you, God, who opens your hands and feeds every human being. And then they start the ceremony. Some people raise the chalot sort of like as a testimony, to God's sanctity and and ruling over the world. There are really a lot of customs. I don't know if you've ever seen the custom that you take the knife and you do a mark. Okay, before you cut the challah, you actually do a mark. You've seen that on the chalot. And that is sort of like to show like a mark of where you're gonna cut it. Forgot the reason actually. I had it in my mind. Maybe I'll remember. There's just so many. Yeah, there's just so many customs. I think I remember why. I think it's because there's a debate. Where do you start eating from the bread? Do you take it like from the middle, the best part, okay, or do you take it from the part that is like the crust part, okay?
The end.
Yeah. So there's actually debate in the Talmud. This rabbi said, no, the crust is the best. So you need to eat first from the crust. And some people say, so you make a mark at the middle of the challah, which is like the good side, but then you start cutting it at the, on the crust. So it's like to show that you're sort of like, holding both opinions.
It sounds like a typical Talmudic discussion.
Oh yeah, right. So there are a lot of customs. I'm sure I did not share all of these. They're beautiful customs, by the way. I don't know if you've ever seen now on Facebook and Instagram. It's like everyone has like special chalot for every event. Okay, for Rosh Hashanah you make like round challah. So we have like a good and round year. I see for Shavuot, I see people making the shape of the 10 Commandments, chalot. For Chanukah, I see people like making like like dreidels, chalot. It's like different symbols. It's just very funny. And of course, there's the traditional braiding the challah,
yes,
which where does that come from? Which is also interesting, right? Because usually you eat a regular loaf of bread, and the braiding of the chalot is, I think it really is to make it fancy and to make it like more, appealing. But some people also say that each braid looks like its own bread on its own. And then if you're able to create, a challah that has, 6 braids, which makes it like 12 different loaves, that is sort of like what was done in the temple. They put like these loaves of bread and they would change them every Shabbat. They would change these 12 loaves of bread. So to symbolize that, you braid the chalot. Yes.
When you're baking the challah, some people tear off a part and put it in the oven.
Thank you so much for reminding me that. That's a very important part. When you bake, frashat challah. Yeah. So when you, any kind of bread, not just when you make challah, if it's over a certain weight, I think it's like a kilo or something like that, you're supposed to take a certain part and burn it, okay? In ancient times, you would give that part to the priest. You had a priest neighbor, you would knock on the door and say, hello, Mr. Priest, here's your portion. Okay, the priest did not have a land, so they were not able to, to grow crops. So you would have to feed the priest back then. So that's why that tradition is still being held until today. And there's a special blessing that you do. It became like in Israel, in modern Israel today, and also I think here as well, it's like a women's ceremony as well. Like they bake challah, they gather, a lot of women gather together, and there's like a whole ceremony and they all take out the challah, and that's like a special moment of blessing, etc. Why? Chabad does it. A lot of institutions do that. It's a beautiful ceremony. And if you want to do that here, we'll all be happy to do it with you. They do it a lot of times before weddings, or if someone's sick, so they do it like for their recovery and things like that. Okay, so now we can finally eat. We finished all the ceremonies, right? We had wine on an empty stomach. We just had bread, and now starts the certain Shabbat food that I was talking about before. Krepalach and gefilte fish, and it's a Sephardi home, so it's a very spicy fish, and it's like there's so many traditions. There's also a big debate about the fork and the knife that you use for the fish. There's some customs that you're not supposed to use it also for meat. Okay, so they actually have a different set. You bring have you ever seen that you?
Yeah, my set has separate fish servings pieces. My silverware set comes like that.
So some people are very particular with that, so you don't mix it together. Yes.
In my family, we also use separate plates.
Yes, and people use separate plates also for fish. They don't want the fish to touch the meat part, because it says somewhere in the Talmud that according to medical opinions, again in the Talmud, this was like before modern medicine, that it's dangerous to mix them together. And there's a big debate, by the way, about having dairy and fish, okay, which in Ashkenazi traditions is permitted, but in Sephardi traditions it's not permitted to have that. It's considered not safe, but I think I think modern medicine today discovered that it's probably is okay.
Well, we talk about utensils. It was, I would say, relatively modern, but people didn't have forks. That was a late invention. They really did everything with their knives. They eat the meat from the knife.
Spirit.
Right. But I think that because of the separation of the fish and meat, so they would maybe clean the other knife. There are some archaeological evidence of like a two fork, like twos, yeah. So, but it became more in Europe. You're right, that it's definitely more modern, not modern, but it's a much later issue. The next thing that you do is the Shabbat Zmirot and songs. So there are different songs, and Zmirot are like special written poems that were done for Shabbat, and each community has its own melodies. It's a beautiful part of Shabbat, and some families are very strict about, you sing a certain song after the gefilte fish, another song after the soup, and the kids could go crazy at something like that. And there are also the songs that you're supposed to do Friday night. God forbid you would do them on Shabbat morning after lunch. So there's all these crazy traditions, which some follow and some don't. And then, of course, is the grace after the meal, the Birkat Hamazon, which we also do in our synagogue, which it's compiled of 4 different blessings, blessing God for providing for the whole world, Baruch Atah Hashem Hazan et Hakol, and also blessing God for the land that has given us all this delicious and good food, and also blessing God for building Jerusalem and the Jewish people. And the last one is just thanking God for all the goodness in the world. And there's different blessings that you add. You bless the people around the table. You bless, the people of Israel for peace. People have added different the blessing for like good parnasah, for good, so our bank account is always full, that we can always provide for a beautiful Shabbat meal. That's sort of like the goal of the Jewish family, is that to be able to provide another beautiful Shabbat meal and another beautiful Shabbat meal. And there's also this thing like the Talmud says that this poor man is like collecting food from the people in his town, and they're asking, like, he's doing it week after week, and then they're like asking, like, is he ever going to repay us? So God is telling him, don't worry, I'm the guarantor to these loans. Okay, one day you'll be paid, which means like in the world to come. It's not like, you're going to get cash, but in the world to come, you'll be paid properly for helping, the poor, so they can have like a proper Shabbat table. It's a very important community thing that everyone in the city has to make sure that every Jew that wants to have a proper Shabbat can do that. So that's also the custom of inviting guests over, etc. There's one thing here that I forgot to add, which is washing, and I'll do that as we speak, washing the hands. And we had washing the hands before. So so there's a big debate in the Talmud about washing your hands before the graetz of the meal, and this is actually meant to clean your hands. As Larry said, forks were rare, maybe only knives were around, so people would eat with their hands, and then you would come, dirty hands to do the graetz after meals. That would not be proper. Okay, so you would wash, the fingertips of your hands. It's called the ma'im achronim. I'll write it in Hebrew, so just so you see it. So it's like the waters, like the final water before. This is the. Sorry about that.
Is the second washing of the hands the process?
There's no blessing.
There's no blessing.
There's no
Do
blessing.
you still go and take the?
Yeah, some people do 3 times, and yeah.
Okay, so
but it's not customary anymore. It's like, I think only Sephardi and Hasidic families do that. Most Orthodox families don't do it anymore.
Do they leave the table to do this?
No, you do it at the table.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like a special container to do that. Okay, Oneg Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat means the pleasure of Shabbat. It's a very big, important mitzvah to enjoy Shabbat. So after we ate, which is part of the enjoyment, there are different practices of sanctifying the Shabbat, and there are different traditions. For example, the bakashot. Bakashot in Hebrew means asking for. Okay, we're asking, for prosper life, etc. These are a set of beautiful poems and prayers in Sephardi communities, especially in Moroccan communities, and they go to the synagogue late at night in the winter times, because Shabbat begins much earlier and dinner is over early. So they go, let's say, after the kids go to sleep, they go to the synagogue and they have all these special prayers and stuff like that. I've been there. They bring a lot of food. They bring, alcohol. It's like a whole party in the synagogue, and all the, and the kids were still up. They sing as well. Everyone gets their own part to sing. It's really a beautiful tradition. If you've ever been to Jerusalem in this time, usually go to the shuk, the Machne Yehuda shuk, and to the synagogues. It's a beautiful tradition. Study and reading time. This is, a quality time to study with your children, to study Torah, Talmud, or to read, and to, sort of like have time to reflect on the week. Family time. It's very important that people are able to devote time to their family after a very busy week. Walking on Shabbat, enjoying nature is also very nice. We have this in our congregation. We have the Wandering Jews, which is a beautiful thing. You're supposed to walk on Shabbat. You're not supposed to run on Shabbat, okay? Because you're not at leisure. You're sort of like, you need to take it easy on Shabbat. You're only allowed to run on Shabbat to the synagogue, okay? And the Talmud says, why? Because the rabbi is giving the sermon, you don't want to miss it, okay? So the Talmud actually says people were running, and it's like, they were like stopping, no, you're not allowed to run. She said, no, I'm running to the rabbi's sermon, start beginning very soon. Okay, you could go, you could run, okay? So that's very funny. I have to admit, I do jog on Shabbat, but I don't run. Okay. First of all, I'm very slow, and the second thing, it is my enjoyment. I feel a lot of enjoyment that that I'm able to jog on Shabbat and look at nature and observe. So there's some people that say
At the end, you can give a sermon.
and I could give a sermon. I could give myself a sermon, right? Okay. Snacks and calories on Shabbat. The joke is that God does not count calories on Shabbat. So you need to enjoy yourself. You need to eat like the good foods of the earth. But I think the doctors do count calories on Shabbat, even though God doesn't. So be aware with that. And of course, being with friends and the community is an important, beautiful part of Shabbat as well. Okay, what's this? Oh, rest and sleep. I forgot that. So, I have this twice. Okay, I'll delete it. So now we only have once. Rest and sleep is a very important part of Shabbat. Okay, and this is another Jewish joke I love, which is okay, Shabbat. Okay, Shin Bet Taf. Okay, so Shin is Sheina, sleep. Bet is Beshabbat, on Shabbat, and Taf is Ta'anug, a pleasure. So sleeping on Shabbat is a pleasure. Okay, so it's like an acronym. Okay, so that's why it's very important to rest on Shabbat. Okay, and a lot of people catch up on sleep on Shabbat, and then the biggest joke in Israel is no one sleeps afterwards on Saturday night because everyone is like slept so much in the afternoon, and then everyone's tired Sunday in Israel because they were all sleeping. But it's a work day in Israel, right? So everyone's tired on the first day of the week. Okay, we now move to the Shabbat morning services. Okay, where there are different parts of the service. First of all, there's the regular daily parts that happen every day, and they're on Shabbat. They're just added to the service. We don't skip them. That's why services are so long on Shabbat. There's special Shabbat prayers. Some of them are very ancient. Some of them are from the time of the Talmud or from the Middle Ages. And they entered the Siddur, the prayer book, and then a different generation adds more, and no one takes any out. Okay, so they just pile up, and that's why it becomes longer and longer. There is an additional special prayer, which is the Musaf. Okay, on a regular day, you're supposed to pray 3 times a day: Shacharit in the morning, Mincha in the afternoon, and Maariv, which is the evening. On Shabbat, there's a 4th prayer, because it symbolizes the additional sacrifice that was done in the temple on Shabbat, which is called Musaf. Okay, so Musaf is like to add. When I add something, so when I add a 4th prayer to the 3 regular prayers, it's called Musaf, so it's the additional prayer. And in it, there are very interesting versions. Where in the Orthodox version, it says, may we get to rebuild the temple and sacrifice the same sacrifices that were done like in the temple, which Uvayom HaShabbat, Shnei Kvasim, to bring 2 goats and to sacrifice it. So the prayer is, may we not only rebuild the temple, but may we also be able to renew our sacrifices there, okay? In the Reformed tradition, they went out against the whole concept of sacrifices and rebuilding the temple, and therefore they do not have Musaf. They don't have that additional prayer. So if you go to the Reformed synagogue and you look at their prayer book, they took out completely that prayer. It doesn't even exist there, okay? The conservative movement, this is actually an interesting way to see what the conservative, we're in a conservative synagogue, and sometimes people ask us, what's the difference between conservative and Orthodox? What's the difference between conservative and Reform? So here's a good way to explain to people the difference. We have Musaf, okay? But we change the language of the prayer, okay? While we pray for the rebuilding of the temple, we do not pray for the renewal of the sacrifices, because we don't want, I at least don't want the bloodbath of slaughtering innocent goats like in ancient times were done. So we pray and we say, okay, like our ancestors did in ancient times, we want to rebuild the temple. We acknowledge that they did it, okay, but we aspire for a different kind of temple, a temple where it brings peace and love to humanity, where where people treat each other and are able to take care of poverty in the world. That's sort of like the temple that we're praying for. That's like a beacon to the rest of the world. So the conservative method is you preserve the halachic thing, which is adding the prayer, okay, but you change the content of the prayer so you're able to also, keep the tradition along with the change. It's sort of like the slogan of the conservative movement is tradition and change. So you see that how it is, embodied in this example, where the Orthodox movement hasn't changed at all the prayer and praying for the sacrifices to come back, and the Reform took it out completely, ignoring that that you need to add another prayer for Shabbat, and the conservative movement is sort of like walking that fine balance in between in a beautiful ideological way. Okay, the sermon of the rabbi is something that's very important. There are, and I'm not saying it just because I'm the rabbi. I'm saying it because, according to the times of the Talmud and the Mishnah, there are evidence that the rabbi's sermon was the main part of the service. People came to listen to the rabbi. The rabbi would tell it that there are actually recorded sermons of rabbis from the 5th century, where they would have very lengthy sermons, by the way, and they would start with one issue, which had to be the verse, and they would go on a completely different note and talk about whatever they wanted to talk about, and then they would tie it in and go back to that verse, okay, and this would go on, and people, it was like a whole institution, the rabbi's sermon, and there are books and books that are written about that. In the Hasidic world, they sat down and they wrote it Saturday night, because you can't, record it or write it on Shabbat, so it was written by the pupils of the rabbis, and that's how we have a lot of those sermons as well. Until today, they just had to have good memory. The rabbi would go over and maybe censor, oh, I never said that, and it's like change it whatever way they wanted.
Rabbi, did they, as opposed to the sermon, did they ever institute that as a study session?
As a study session?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was done more like on Mincha, the study. So there's always that tradition that after Mincha on Shabbat, between Mincha and Mariv, they would sit down and study with the rabbi. That's usually what the traditional synagogues do. Then there's also the Torah reading, okay? The Torah reading would usually be before the rabbi's sermon, sometimes after. Then the Torah, there's 7 parts to the Torah reading, and 7 people that are called up to the Torah. The number 7 probably came from the 7 days of the week. And the Talmud says actually that women could also read from the Torah, which is an interesting, when we get to the whole issue of prayer and what parts women can lead in prayer, we'll get to that part as well.
That was even before conservative.
Well, I'm talking about the times of the Talmud. Yeah. I'm talking about it, thousands of years ago.
Which is very interesting.
Very interesting to see how that history evolved. And the last part is the special Shabbatot throughout the year. Okay, when a holiday falls let's say it's Purim, so the Shabbat before Purim is a special Shabbat. It's called Shabbat Zacho, remembering, and we remember what the Amalek did to the people of Israel, and the mitzvah to wipe out Amalek. Okay, so we do that on the Shabbat before Purim. The Shabbat before Passover has a special name to it, et cetera, et cetera. So there are like, I don't know, maybe like 10 special Shabbatot throughout the year where services change a bit. If it's a Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh, before the new moon, so there's a special prayers. Or if Rosh Chodesh falls on a Shabbat, so you take out an additional Torah and then you read from 2 Torahs. Or if a Shabbat falls on a Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the moon, and Chanukah, you take 3 Torahs. Okay, 1 for reading the regular Torah portion, 1 for Rosh Chodesh, and 1 for Chanukah. You never take more than 3. Okay, but that could be a very lengthy Shabbat because you also sing Hallel, etc., etc.
I was just gonna ask you, how does Hallel, sort of say Rosh Chodesh, not for the holidays per se, how did that sort of get put in there?
So that has to do more with the prayers. We'll talk about that when we get to the prayers, and it really comes from the need to say gratitude to God for miracles that were done for the Jewish people, like on Hanukkah or or during the holidays, and then it was also said in the temple apparently. Okay, and that's why we add the Hallel. We'll get to that when we talk about prayer. Okay, so that's really it for today. Any questions? Yes.
We had the opportunity to attend Shabbat with Chabad in Reykjavik
Oh wow!
this year, and it was done very late in the evening. So our question, which we didn't get answered, was, when does Shabbat begin as you move into northern latitudes? And what happens, of course, ultimately when there is no real sunrise or setting of the sun?
That's a very good question, and usually the answer is you need to preserve 25 hours of a Shabbat. Okay, so you would start maybe like around dinner time. Some people would say you would even light candles, and then you preserve the Shabbat like 25 hours, because you don't just observe a Shabbat of like 3-4 hours, which is more realistic. And the other good answer is like Jews shouldn't live there. They should only live in places that are not too cold, that they won't freeze to death, and that they'll be able to observe Shabbat. That's the joke that everyone makes.
Well, the other one is where we had an Israeli astronaut. So
Right.
90 minutes.
Yeah.
that was
It
the
just a
joke.
few minutes, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
So in Torah, we do not have description of Shabbat in Torah.
Right. Yeah. This whole set that I said, and I didn't finish. I want to talk about next time about Havdalah and the rest of Shabbat. It's very important that we do that. It's just it's going to take too long, so I want to continue that next time. But this entire walkthrough of Shabbat does not exist in the
Did it
Bible.
start in the diaspora?
It started at the time. No, it started in Israel and Babylonia, probably in both places, diaspora and in Israel. It's not exactly clear where it started, but these are probably traditions that were handed over from generation to generation and were picked up as we go along. And because we're talking about a tradition of more than 3,000 years. So it can't be that what happened 3,000 years ago is exactly the same. Okay, the same goes for Passover. I'll talk about that. Passover has completely changed from the time of the Bible to what we do today. It's not the same at all.
So we can say that Shabbat holds Jewish religion.
Yes, yeah. Shabbat is definitely a Jewish invention in that sense that it doesn't appear in the Bible. The Bible is observed also by Christians and other faiths, but Shabbat as Jews do it is special for Shabbat. Okay,